Location, New York, Susan Storm's private lab. Time, 11:41 a.m. 1 week later, the low hum of lab equipment filled the room. Screens cast a light blue glow over walls cluttered with sketches, samples, and half-drained coffee mugs. Susan Storm stood in the center of it all, sleeves rolled up, hands gloved, eyes focused. She adjusted the microscope, leaned in, and frowned. Another trial, another flawed reaction. The serum hadn't stabilized. Again, she stepped back and dragged a holographic interface toward her. The genetic model rotated, showing her the familiar spiral of DNA, the mutant strain she'd been working with for months now. Mutated at the chromosomal level. Too volatile. Too embedded. Susan pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, then tapped a few keys, pulling up previous test results. Trial 139, organ rejection. Trial 140, neural degradation. Trial 141, partial success, then cellular collapse. She clenched her jaw. She wasn't trying to erase anyone. That was never the goal. She didn't see mutation as a disease. But the truth was, some people were suffering because of their powers, trapped in bodies that betrayed them, turned into walking targets, or left isolated by the way they looked. They weren't soldiers or criminals. Just people. And not all of them wanted to be special. Mutant rights activists told them to embrace their identity. Xavier's camp preached harmony. Magneto wanted power, but what about those who just wanted normal, a boy whose bones wouldn't stop growing through his skin? A girl whose touch caused internal bleeding. A man whose voice ruptured eardrums if he so much as whispered. No school could fix that. No speech could change how the world looked at them. Susan brought up her primary project file, Recode. The serum was still theoretically unstable, inconsistent, and dangerous in its current state. But it was getting there. Slowly, she turned toward the sample freezer and pulled out a fresh vial. The latest formula. Slightly different protein binders. A tighter sequence control. She walked back to the testing chamber, placed the vial in the analyzer, and initiated the simulation. A digital readout scrolled quickly: 0.60% stability, 0.65%, 0.71%, then a spike, cell degradation, failure. Susan swore under her breath. She shut it down and leaned back against the desk, rubbing her temples. She was close. Too close to give up now. Outside, the faint sounds of New York filtered through the lab's walls. The usual traffic, sirens, the steady rhythm of a city that never slept. But in here, it was just her, a few AI assistants running basic routines, and the mounting weight of expectations. No press. No funding. No corporate sponsors. Just one woman chasing a cure no one asked for, but that some desperately needed. She stared at the screen again for a moment before she walked over to her whiteboard, still covered in scribbles from the night before, and added a single word, choice. She capped the marker, exhaled slowly, and was about to turn back to the simulation logs when her tablet chimed. New message. She tapped it without thinking, expecting another automated test update or a ping from Johnny asking for lunch money again. But the sender made her pause. Tony Stark subject, lunch? And a little something important. Her brow furrowed as she opened it. Dr. Susan Storm, hope this finds you in one piece and not buried under caffeine and simulation failures. I've followed your published work with interest, and I was especially impressed with your article on the genetic research on incurable diseases and super protein bars for athletics. Elegant stuff. You've got a sharp mind, and I think you're the kind of person who might appreciate a conversation about something a little bigger than lab work. How about lunch? Somewhere quiet, no press, no buzz. Just food and a discussion. I think you'll want to hear. If you're free, I'll send the coordinates to Tony Stark. Susan stared at the screen for a long moment, rereading it twice. There was nothing invasive in the tone. No arrogance, no assumption. Just curiosity. Respect, even, and Stark himself, the man behind the holographic system now running the world's economy and academia, wanted to talk to her. She let out a quiet breath and walked to her window, eyes flicking across the city skyline. She wasn't the type to get starstruck, but she wasn't stupid either. This was big. And it wasn't just about tech or science, it was about being seen by someone who actually understood what she was trying to do. Most of the researchers made fun of her articles. She has no funding and is running on her father's money and a little bit of what she gets from the sales of the protein bars. Now, when someone actually praised her, well, she was definitely gonna meet him. A smile tugged at the edge of her mouth. She picked up her tablet and replied, "Count me in. Let me know where." She hit send, then leaned back in her chair, feeling the tension ease from her shoulders for the first time in weeks. Finally, a real conversation. Location, Manhattan, the Ember Atrium, rooftop restaurant. Time, 1:30 p.m., the Ember Atrium, a rooftop restaurant tucked away above a boutique hotel in Lower Manhattan. It wasn't a place that showed up on tourist guides. No neon signs, no photos on walls. Just clean stone tables, soft instrumental jazz, and a view of the skyline that made the city feel quiet for once. Tony sat at a table near the far corner, dressed in a dark blazer over a simple black t-shirt, sunglasses on the side of the table. He took the glass of apple fizz and took a sip before putting it back. Susan stepped inside wearing a clean, fitted navy blazer over a black turtleneck and dark jeans. Her hair was tied in a simple bun, and she was wearing glasses. Simple. Smart. She scanned the space once, found him instantly. Tony noticed that she was wearing makeup, and a nice scent of jasmine perfume came from her. And she was so beautiful that Tony's heart skipped a beat or two. Seeing her on photo and real life, well. Real life version wins. Tony stood as she approached. "Susan Storm," he said, offering his hand with a relaxed smile. "Or do you prefer Doctor?" "Depends," she replied, shaking it. "Are you trying to flirt or hire me?" Tony chuckled. "Neither. First meeting. I try not to make moves on people I might need to work with later. It's messy." "Noted," she said, sliding into the chair across from him. She glanced at the folder on the table. "You brought homework." "Light reading," he said. "Mostly yours. Some of it was buried so deep I thought I'd need a shovel." "Impressive work." "Dang. He is handsome." Susan raised an eyebrow. "I thought only angry forum trolls and dusty tenure boards read those." "I'm not dusty," Tony said, flagging down a server. "And I don't troll." "Well, maybe recreationally." The server poured water into their glasses and took their orders. Susan asked for a grilled salmon bowl, and Tony ordered whatever looked the least like rabbit food. As the server disappeared, Tony leaned forward slightly. "I'll get straight to it," he said. "I'm building something bigger. Space, biology, interface systems, genetics. Stuff that requires people who know how to walk into unknowns without falling apart." Susan folded her arms. "You do realize I'm a one-person lab operation. I also realize that you built your entire protein binder model off a junk budget and a box of borrowed servers from Empire State University. Which makes you exactly the kind of person I trust. Someone who doesn't need 10 grant committees and a Tesla coil to get things done." She narrowed her eyes slightly. "What are you working on?" Tony opened his palm before her. The nanites flowed out from his wristwatch, forming a smart glass. Sue was taken by surprise. "Nanomachine?" She nearly raised her voice and was about to stand up, but quickly gathered herself. "Yep. Put it on." Susan took and slipped on the smart glass slowly, uncertain at first, then froze, her pupils dilated slightly as the world around her shifted. The entire rooftop dissolved into a digital horizon. She was no longer sitting at a restaurant but standing in the middle of a vast hangar suspended in orbit over a virtual planet. Below her, steel beams rose like growing branches. Massive ship scaffolds, raw alloy plating, drones weaving support struts together like ants on a nest, lines of live data floated beside her, structural integrity charts, radiation mapping, nanite logistics, atmospheric pressure readings, all moving in real time. A thin golden path traced itself along a long corridor of the structure marked, Starfire, Phase 1. "What is this?" she whispered. Tony's voice echoed slightly inside the virtual space beside her, relaxed but focused. Starfire. The first manned, private deep space vessel. It's being built right now. I made it to study cosmic radiation directly, close to the sources that shape evolution, black holes, supernovas, ambient stellar fields. Another window opened beside her, a rotating strand of double helix DNA overlaid with cosmic energy patterns. The coils shifted with each pass, changing color and shape, reacting as bursts of radiation interacted with them. I've already built detectors for high-band cosmic energy. The kind that warps atomic behavior. The stuff that doesn't just burn, it rewrites. And if it rewrites the right way, the screen shifted again. 3 projections appeared. Each one showed a simulation. In the first, a human cell disintegrated under raw gamma exposure. In the second, a violent and unstable cellular mutation, but in the third, the cell adapted. Regenerated. Enhanced neural activity. Stabilized molecular vibration. Even resistance to entropy over time. Cosmic evolution, Tony said. Or at least, the potential for it. Susan reached up slowly and rotated the helix with her hand. The system responded instantly, like touching real glass. She zoomed in, saw proteins bond under impossible pressure, then replicate. "This is impossible," she muttered. "This shouldn't be happening. Even latent mutations can't absorb that kind of radiation without complete denaturation." Tony nodded. "Exactly. That's where I need your brain. You are one of the best in the field of biochemical sciences." "No. You are the best. Help me find a solution. Because we are going to space to study cosmic radiation, and anything can happen out there. I want us to be prepared for everything." "Huh. Wow. Wait a sec." Sue took off the glasses. "Us?" Tony leaned forward, resting his arms on the table, voice calm, and he had that signature smile. "Why? You don't want to?" Susan blinked, thrown slightly by the bluntness of the question. Tony didn't wait for her to answer. His eyes were steady, his voice quieter now. "We're going to be the first in human history to get that close to the sun. Not just orbit it, not just wave from a satellite. I'm talking proximity deep enough to study raw cosmic radiation at its source. Not the filtered kind that slips through our atmosphere, but the real thing. The kind that shaped stars. The kind that might have shaped us." He let that hang for a moment. "And up there, anything can happen. Maybe the containment systems fail. Maybe some radiation breaches the shield. Maybe someone gets exposed. I'm not betting on 'maybe it'll be fine' when we're outside Earth's safety net. I need someone who understands what happens to the human body when it's pushed past nature's limit. Someone who's already thinking about how to stop cellular decay before it starts. Someone who's not afraid to look at a genetic anomaly and ask, 'What can we do about it?'" Susan leaned back slightly, arms folded. The wind picked up just enough to tug at her collar, but she didn't break eye contact. "And you think that someone's me?" Tony gave a slow nod. "I know it's you. You didn't just study this stuff. You chased it down when everyone else was busy chasing glory. You didn't do it for money or recognition. You did it because you actually gave a damn. That matters more than anything else. I know everything you've chased so far. That's why I chose you for this mission." He continued. "I've got engineers, physicists, pilots, and AI running half the systems. What I don't have is someone with your instincts. Someone who can look at a problem with a human body in zero gravity, under stress, maybe even mutated, and find the thread that keeps them alive. That's why I want you with us. Not behind a desk or reading lab reports from home. Up there. Front lines. Because if something goes wrong, I don't want the second best person on this planet guessing what to do." Susan didn't answer right away, she looked out over the edge of the rooftop. The city stretched out beneath them, alive and moving, but small compared to what he was talking about. Space. The edge of the sun. Radiation that could tear atoms apart. And a ship called Starfire being built to meet it head-on. She glanced back at him. Tony wasn't grinning anymore. This wasn't a stunt or a vanity project. He was serious. And he trusted her. "I'll think about it," she said finally. Tony nodded. "It's a big decision. Take your time. And if you want to visit the site, just let me know." The waiter arrived right on cue, placing their dishes on the table with quiet precision. Grilled salmon for Susan, a pepper-seared chicken bowl for Tony. The scent of citrus glaze and roasted herbs filled the air as the city's sounds faded behind the subtle ambience of the rooftop. Susan picked up her fork and gave Tony a quick side glance. "You always spring space missions on people before lunch?" Tony grinned as he sliced into his chicken. "Only when the person I'm asking might save all our lives." She shook her head, half amused, half still processing. "You really don't know how to ease into things, do you?" "I find small talk highly overrated," Tony said, chewing thoughtfully. "Besides, there are only so many ways to say, 'Your research saved a bunch of people from spontaneous combustion,' before it gets weird." Susan arched an eyebrow. "And here I was hoping this was just a casual power lunch." Tony raised his glass. Casual power lunch, with a side of existential science and future space drama. They ate for a while in companionable silence. Susan couldn't help noticing that Tony didn't rush anything. He wasn't performing. No ego games. Just, present. Focused. Still carrying the weight of something unspoken, but hiding it under sharp edges and wit. "So the expo," she said between bites. "Big show, huh?" Tony leaned back slightly. "Bigger than ever. But not in the usual fireworks and dancers way. This time, it's real. Real projects, real scientists. No celebrity fluff pieces. I want to put people like you at the front." Susan looked genuinely surprised. "You're planning to put research front and center?" "Research, ethics, people. The whole structure of the scientific world has been skewed by corporate bidding. We fix that by showing the public what science can actually do, when it's not bought." She smiled. "So you're reforming the world while building a spaceship?" Tony lifted his glass again. Multitasking. They clinked glasses. Just water and fizz, but it felt like more than a toast. As they finished the last of their meal, Tony pushed his plate aside and looked at her, that glint back in his eye. "So, want to see where Starfire's being built?" Susan blinked. "Wait. Like, now?" she asked in shock. Everything was happening too fast for her to digest. "Yeah," he nodded. "Unless you've got other plans. Brunch with human biology? Afternoon yoga?" She grinned, catching the mood. "I have a meeting with a protein analysis at 3, but it's flaky. Might not show." Tony stood, sliding his jacket over one shoulder. "Then let's go. I've got a ship standing by." Susan grabbed her bag, adjusting her blazer. "I didn't bring anything." "You won't need anything," Tony said as they stepped toward the elevator. "You're with me." She glanced sideways at him as the elevator doors opened. "This is your version of a second date?" Tony looked at her with that same signature smile. "Only if we survive the sun together." Location: private Stark airstrip, outside Manhattan. Time: 3:15 p.m. The car pulled through a private gate just outside the city, winding past layers of automated security and clean, empty tarmac. Susan had expected a simple jet or a helicopter. What she got was not familiar. Her eyes widened as they came to a slow stop. In the middle of the runway sat a craft that didn't look like anything she'd ever seen, not in the military, not in aerospace journals, not even in concept leaks. It was matte black, almost bone-white in certain angles, depending on how the light hit it. Seamless hull. No visible engines. The wings weren't really wings, they were curved blades of alloy that pulsed faintly at the edges, like they were folding space rather than pushing through it. The Stark logo was there, subtle and almost invisible. Susan stepped out slowly, eyes scanning the craft. Is that a plane? Tony walked ahead, backpack slung casually over one shoulder. Technically, it's a variable vector atmospheric orbiter with grav-null repulsors and a dual-mode arc engine. All running on a clean energy source. She gave him a flat look. So, a plane. He smirked over his shoulder. A very cool plane. They walked up the fold-down ramp. The interior was just as matte white with soft white lighting, curved alloy walls, and a cockpit interface that looked more like a command center than a pilot seat. No switches. Just hard light projections, motion recognition, and 2 flight chairs. Tony gestured toward one. Pick your seat. Pilot or co-pilot. Either way, you'll feel cooler than you should. Susan hesitated for a second, then dropped into the co-pilot seat, fingers brushing over the smooth surface of the console. It responded instantly, lighting up and sinking to her vitals. Welcome, sir. Hermes' voice echoed softly. It would seem you have a guest. Yup. Susan Storm. She might be joining us soon. Well, set the course to our desert base, Tony ordered. Affirmative, Hermes replied. AI? She asked. Yeah, Tony said as he leaned back on his seat. The engines didn't roar. They hummed, barely audible. The entire plane lifted without a single tremble. Susan's eyes widened again. No turbulence? No atmosphere drag, Tony said. Grav-null tech. We're gliding on a synthetic gravity channel until we're clear of standard flight lanes. The jet angled upward, slicing through clouds like they were fog.as. The city fell away behind them. Susan looked out the side view, the sky darkened into a deep blue. She leaned back in her seat and said, almost to herself, this doesn't feel real. Tony glanced over. Neither did you, saying yes. She gave him a look. I didn't say yes. You got in the plane. I said maybe. You buckled your seatbelt. I'm considering. Tony grinned, leaned back, and let the AI take over. That's closer than most people ever get. 3 hours later, above the Sahara Desert, Susan sat forward in her seat, watching the terrain change. Then her eyes narrowed. Wait, what's that? Below, the ground was shifting, not sand, metal, distorting surroundings. Flat panels of alloy and steel stretched out, disappearing into cliffs and craters. A massive complex. Geometric. Clean. Not a single light visible from the sky. It's cloaked, Tony said. You wouldn't see it on satellite. You wouldn't hear it on radar. But it's real. As they descended, towers shifted from the sand, antenna arrays, energy dispersal units, kinetic dampeners. The jet gently set down on an invisible platform, its gravlocks engaging with a click.